Hello, everyone. I am Sriracha. I am your ghost classmate. I have seen a lot of your faces in the like seminars and discussions, but have been working full time for the most part, and just haven't been around. Um, I'm Sriracha, and for our Indigenous graphic novels course, I wrote my first paper and then second paper, like the revised version, um, on this graphic novel. Um, Read a Haida manga. I think was like it drew me in aesthetically right away. I've always been like super interested in um, like Haida art conventions and um, definitely like as a like young person, probably like in middle school and stuff, like did a lot of like problematically appropriative Haida, like not even actually good imitations, but just some problematic like knockoffy stuff. Um, before I like understood the kind of the importance of before I look, I don't know if any of you guys were talking about like colonialism and coloniality and those power dynamics of appropriation when you were like 13 and 14, but I am like 24 now, and when I was in middle school that was like so far off the radar, and my like art teacher was just like, wow, this is so amazing and creative, like cool that you like native art. And I was like, yeah. So anyways, I was drawn to the aesthetic right away because I've always really enjoyed Haida art. I found the story really hard to understand at the beginning. Like there's a lot of things like because of that Haida specific like artistic conventions that I found like there were a lot of characters that I didn't know how to identify. Like for example, when Red's having his vision quest, there's this like bush figure that says like hello little one. And I just like felt that that was significant in some way that I couldn't access, but just like found that interesting. Um, but anyway, yeah, I found it like a little hard to like access what was going on. So I spent a lot of time on YouTube listening to Michael Yakulana's talk to try and get inside his head and understand where he's coming from and stuff. Um, and yeah, so my paper focuses on like the most like stylistically prominent, you could argue, feature of this book, which is like the black form line, instead of like the blank space, the white gutters between like linear picture frames. And yeah, listening to Michael talk about it, it's clear that this like the use of like the undulating black line is way more like spiritual and cosmological as well. Like I shouldn't say as though they're distinct, but like embedded within it's kind of like decolonizing statement, or like I don't decolonizing is also a weird one. What I'm trying to say is I think that like um Michael in like the stylistic choice of this black form line like really is trying to communicate a lot of like really complex ideas, as well as just like authentically expressing himself as a Haida artist. And those complicated ideas are like kind of what I tried to unpack in my paper. And I'll just read you little excerpts of that because my mind, in terms of freewheeling, is drawing blanks right now. So, the kind of like thesis of the work I was doing said this paper will explore time and space in Yakulanis's Red and how the sensibilities of this Haida manga challenge colonial assumptions about empty space, linear time, and truth. And the truth part about like why I became interested in like how all of this relates to truth is because of like the narrative like possibilities, like the possibility of a narrative to, or like storytelling to both observe reality but also create reality in like the observation of it or riffing on it. So I think that like these like we all know, we're like in this course, we have experienced real life, we understand like how mythology can impact like archetypes and psychology. Like I think we're all on the same page that like storytelling has a huge bearing on like truth and reality, as well as just like, and like that kind of observation creation line is like really fuzzy and definitely like mutually impacting. But yeah, why I became interested in the truth aspect of it is like just the opening line of this novel. Once upon a time, this was a true story. And I just thought that was like an incredible way for this graphic novel to begin, because it kind of signals like right away to all of our readers that like the relationship between like the time space continuum and truth, which we in like a European Western context think of as being super static and like objective and accessible through the scientific method alone or through like written documents. And that's kind of like valorized as like capital T truth. And things that are seen as like subjective or culturally contingent, like are seen as like are devalued and put on a lower rung of the hierarchy of what capital T truth is. And of course, that's like complete horseshit, because these things like the scientific method or written documents are still, that's still a like culturally contingent decision to valorize that sense of objectivity, which isn't actually objective. There's still like subjective facts in that. So I was just really interested that right from the beginning, he's like, history and truth, like as you know it, it's not what we're talking about here. This is like an oral narrative passed down through my family, and once upon a time it was true, but the past has a bearing on the present. So that I just really found that interesting. And then yeah, some other things I was trying to unpack in terms of like the convention of the form line is like Haida cosmology, which admittedly I don't know a lot about. I was getting everything that I wrote about in terms of Haida cosmology from Eukelanis's words himself, and like what I could derive from like the content of it, of this novel, and how that like, or graphic novel, and how that impact or reflected what Eukelanis was saying. Yeah, so the crux, I feel like I'm getting all over the place here, but the crux of it was I was really interested in this play between these like micro pictures that make up a whole story and this like macro picture that like requires the reader to like literally like dismember the book in order to put it on a different plane. How that play between like the micro and the macro like is this kind of like greater reflection that's also like again emphasized through the narrative itself about Red in terms of like individual and community. This kind of like, yes, you're an individual element, but you're also always integrally like in relation to a collective, whether that's like a macro collective is like big as the universe and the multiverse and whatever the hell else is out there, or just like the like micro connectivity of like the different people and creatures and like rocks and stuff in your like lived community. So yeah, the like kind of like form line overall, like as a stylistic choice above like instead of using the blank space of the gutter, when I was listening to Eukelanis talk, he just like, he doesn't use the words doctrine of discovery or terra nullius, but that's what he's really talking about. He like mentions he's like just talking about how the white gutter is like akin to like in terms of there being an open white space, that they're like in terms of the visuality of like lines, like direct lines, like how that's reflected in like colonial European like ideas of truth as static and like statically accessible, and how that then is reflected of this like European projection of like the Americas or like any of the like quote unquote new world as being like blank space. as that being like a projection that suited their agenda as opposed to any kind of reality. And how these like doctrines of discovery or terra nullius, like this like theory of empty land, enabled Europeans to justify settler colonialism, to divvy up and claim and like linearly segment like all of this like indigenous land as their own. So yeah, so the fact that these lines are like undulating and everything's always connected and there's not like these like gutters that are spaces of like yes interpretation but also possible projection based on what our own desires are as a reader, I think it's like really powerful and really important to Eucalanus. And I'm going way over time here, so I'll just kind of read this last quote that really hit me. Yeah, this is from a TEDx talk from Eucalanus himself. He says, if you look at this black line, you'll see that this matrix has its own presence. It exists outside our tiny narrative. It has a presence of its own. Galaxies will continue to collide and be born without us. This Haida Manga piece is not an exploration of how we're separate from galaxies or how we're separate from one another. It's an examination of how we're joined together. So yeah, so my paper in the end was just kind of like an exploration of that play between individual and collective, micro and macro, and this kind of like fluid and undulating connection through time and space and how that bears on like truth and what we consider true. Yeah, I hope that what I said made sense. I really, really, really loved this book and enjoyed taking some deep dives into it. Yeah, have a good day.